You know those stubborn weeds you see like everywhere? The ones just busting through the cracks in the sidewalk? Well, it turns out getting rid of them is this surprisingly complex, high-stakes battle that cities are fighting all over the world. Yeah, I mean, we see them everywhere. For city public works departments, it's basically a constant game of whack-a-mole. And you might think, oh, it's just a few weeds. But no, managing them is a massive operation. So for the longest time, the go-to answer was pretty simple. Just spray them with chemical herbicides. But now, with all the growing concerns about the environment and public health, cities are starting to ask a really important question. Is there a better, maybe even safer way to win this war on weeds? All right, so here's what we're gonna do. First, we'll dig into the urban weed problem itself. Then we'll get into the science of heat versus chemicals. After that, we're heading to a real-world showdown down in Australia to see how they stack up. We'll look at the results, performance, price, the whole deal. And finally, we'll ask, is there a smarter way to do all this? So first things first, let's really get why this is such a headache for cities. Believe me, it goes way beyond just, keeping the sidewalks looking pretty. You've got city managers walking this tightrope, right? They need something that flat out works, of course, but they've also got to think about public safety, the environment, and you guessed it, the budget. It is not an easy choice. There's no magic bullet here. All right, so how do you even begin to tackle that balancing act? Well, let's meet the two main contenders in the ring, fighting for the title of weed-free sidewalk champion. In this corner, you've got the reigning champ, this traditional chemical herbicide spray. And in the other corner, the challenger, a high-tech approach using nothing but superheated water and steam. We're talking two totally different philosophies here, both trying to solve the exact same problem. Okay, so the chemical approach, we're usually talking about glyphosate here, is what's called systemic. A good way to think about it is like a poison pill. The plant drinks it up through its leaves, it travels all the way through its system, and then bam, it shuts down a super important enzyme, killing the plant from the inside out. Now, the hydrothermal method, it's the polar opposite. This is a full-on brute force attack. It just blasts the weed with water and steam that's hotter than 150 degrees Celsius. I mean, it's basically cooking the plant alive from the outside in, causing this massive, catastrophic shock to its whole system. So you might be thinking, okay, a blast of hot water, big deal. But the actual science of how this intense heat kills a tough weed so fast is really fascinating. It's not just about scorching the leaves. Oh no, it's about triggering a complete biological meltdown deep inside at the cellular level. And the key player here is a group of molecules called reactive oxygen species. Let's just call them ROS. See, normally, plants handle these little guys just fine. But when you hit them with the extreme stress of a heat blast, everything just spirals completely out of control. Okay, check this out. The intense heat completely throws off the delicate balance inside the plant cells. This chaos causes this huge, out-of-control flood of these unstable ROS molecules. And then they go on an absolute rampage, attacking and destroying everything in their path. Proteins, DNA, cell walls, you name it. It leads to super rapid cell death. And what you're seeing here is basically that total system failure in action. Once the temperature skyrockets past what the plant can handle, all its core functions like photosynthesis for making food, enzyme activity for living, they just completely crash. It's a total shutdown. So, okay, the science is cool, right? But theory is one thing. How does all this actually play out on real city streets? Well, to find out, we're gonna head down under to Australia for a massive real-world showdown. Back in 2009, the city of Joondalup, which is a suburb of Perth, they launched this really ambitious trial. They decided to take these two competing ideas out of the laboratory and put them to the test on their actual streets, on sidewalks, curbs, everywhere, to find out once and for all what really works. So they set up 4 different battle plans. You had a group that was just hydrothermal steam, then a group that was a mix of steam plus a chemical spray. A third group got the standard chemical spray, and the fourth group got a chemical cocktail, a more powerful one with what's called a residual herbicide that's designed to stop new weeds from even starting. All right, so the moment of truth. How did these different methods actually stack up against each other? Well, the results, they might just surprise you. So after just 1 month, it looked like everybody was a winner. Seriously, every single method, from the steam only to that heavy-duty chemical cocktail, they all just annihilated the weeds. We're talking between 81 and 98% control. At this point, you'd be forgiven for thinking the non-chemical steam option was a total slam dunk, but fast forward 8 months and wow, the story completely changed. The effectiveness of that steam-only treatment, it had nosedived to just 24% control. Meanwhile, that powerful chemical mix still holding the line at 60%. Yeah, that early victory for the steam treatment was definitely short-lived. So what the heck happened? Well, the study explains it perfectly. The steam absolutely destroyed everything you could see above the ground. But for those really tough perennial weeds, their deep roots and rhizomes, think of them like tough underground stems. They were safe, insulated by the soil. They survived the heat blast, basically just lying in wait, ready to send up new green shoots. And just like that, the trade-off became crystal clear. The chemicals gave you way better long-term control. The hydrothermal method, great that it's non-chemical, but it just didn't have the staying power. But listen, performance is only half the equation, right? What about the cost? Let's start with the most effective one. That single application of the powerful chemical mix, it cost the city just $88 per kilometer, okay? So remember that number, that's our baseline. Now get ready for this. To get its, let's be honest, pretty poor long-term results, the hydrothermal method had to be applied 3 separate times. And the cost for that, a staggering $532 per kilometer. That is over 6 times more expensive. And the main reason is that it's just a much slower, more labor-intensive process. So this whole thing isn't really about a simple winner and a loser. What the results from this massive experiment really point to is a much smarter, more strategic way of thinking about the whole problem. The researchers actually came up with a really interesting idea, an herbicide reduction scheme. Check out this number right here. They estimated that if you hit the weeds with glyphosate first and then followed up with steam later, it would cost about $242 per kilometer. Now sure, that's more expensive than just using chemicals, but it's less than half the cost of going steam only, and it seriously cuts down on the total amount of chemicals you have to use. It's a middle ground. And that really brings us back to the core dilemma that pretty much every city is facing. So what do? Do you go for the cheapest, most effective option that relies on chemicals? Do you pay a huge premium for a non-chemical method that just doesn't work as well in the long run? Or is the smartest path forward some kind of hybrid approach, a practical compromise between the two? It's a really tough call, and there's definitely no easy answer.